pleased to introduce our speaker today. He's well known to us, the Reverend Daniel O'Connell. In talking with him, I realized there's a lot that he does that I hadn't been aware of. We know that he's a Unitarian Universalist minister. He served as senior minister at the First UU Church in Houston from 2010 to 2018. He's also served churches in Connecticut and Missouri. But following his tenure at UU in Houston, he undertook to become, I don't know how to describe this, a consultant for Medicare, health, and life insurance. And so he answers all of our questions about which Medicare plan works for us and which is best. And I was glad to find that out, and I have his card, and if you have any questions, you might talk to him about it. Anyway, we are very glad to have you here with us today, and welcome.
Good morning. It's good to be here again with you. We start out with a very short reading. It's called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters, Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It is not my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend that I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm still in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. So the thing I want you to notice in that is the progression. Same thing happens. It's really inconvenient, probably slightly painful. One, it's not my fault. Happens again. It's not my fault. It happens again. Well, maybe it's my fault. And then finally, success. It's not always success immediately, is it? Now, when I vent, when I complain about something to someone, it's because I feel bad. Something was unfair. And while venting can let off a little steam, it's temporary. It doesn't really fix anything. And just, because we're in a congregation, because we're in a liberal house of worship, it's useful to point out that like so many other things in history, it all goes back to Adam. In Genesis 3, he says to God, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it." So it's God's fault. It's Eve's fault, not his, and he's complaining about it. Maya Angelou reminds us, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. Don't complain. And we know that, well, at least for me, just reminding myself not to complain, it's not very helpful. In fact, I might even complain about that. So here's a key idea. These frustrations, politics was mentioned, they're not going to really go away. So a complaint is focusing on dissatisfaction, not on problem solving. If your food is bad, you tell the server you're trying to solve a problem. If your computer freezes, you call tech support or your grandchild. But if you gripe to other people and they can't do anything about it, that's complaining. Now, by definition, a complaint must be spoken. So if you just think it, you're fine. Any negative thoughts you may have are not complaining. So there's an acronym for why people complain. It's called GRIPE, G-R-I-P-E. So sometimes people will complain just to get attention. That's the G. About the weather or traffic or something else. The weather is too hot. Translation, please talk to me. Right? If I say, we don't know each other, and I say, hey, the weather is too hot. Well, we're on Southeast Texas, right? And so it's a way to get attention and have some conversation. The complaint about another person means they are holding me up. Remove responsibility. I is inspire envy and brag. What a movie. The acting was bad. The story was lame. Translation, I know a lot about movies. You should let me tell you more. P, power. This sometimes happens in extended families, even in congregations. Someone complains so that you will take their side in a potential dispute. And then E, excuse my performance. I know I said I would stay away from that tree, that apple, but she brought it to me and told me to eat it, so it's her fault. The thing about complaining is it damages our overall health, spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, and it wears down the people around us, especially if it's a steady series. This affects the people that we care about, our loved ones, our coworkers, even our church friends, and yet it is so easy to complain. We complain when we're disappointed, we complain, we criticize, we gossip. Maybe we're unhappy about something and someone, and we feel helpless to change anything. It's a way of venting, just a little steam, let it out. Now, in his book, A Complaint-Free World, Reverend Will Bowen says that complaining, now this is the key insight. To get nothing else out of this today, this is it. Complaining is noticing the faults in others that exist in you. I'll never forget, years ago, my mother was visiting, and she had this little habit. And she would say, Daniel, how has your life been? And I would get in maybe 8 words, and then she would interrupt me and ask me another question. And she did this like fairly constantly. And I'm just thinking, her mind is like this sort of hamster on a wheel. So she gets up, she leaves, she goes to the restroom, and I talk to my then wife, and it's like, this shouldn't bug me so much. Why does this little thing just really irritate me? And she said, because you do exactly the same thing. I mean, it just jumped right over my defenses. There was no defense. The wall, it was just... So, what can we take away from that? Is it any wonder I sometimes notice a friend or family member is a bit picky, a bit of a perfectionist? I don't suppose I have that quality, right? But how is it that I can so easily see that in other people? And if I'm really fooling myself, I'll say to myself, well, I'm not being picky, I'm just being educational, and, I'm sure they would want to know that. What do you mean they don't want to know that? Okay. So there's a flip side to this that can be super helpful, at least it has been for me. You remember the opposite. You notice the good things in other people because you either see them in yourself or you see the potential for that to be in yourself. You notice the good qualities in another person that you have in yourself or that you see in yourself and you want more of. So that's the flip side. If you pay attention to the qualities that you admire in other people, those same qualities can open up in you. There are good qualities in people here in this congregation. I have been coming here on and off for years, and I have seen it because a lot of you have been here for years. And there are good qualities like generosity, compassion, volunteering. We heard all that in the announcements and the joys and concerns. These are all on display here every Sunday I've ever been here in this fellowship. And over the years, in a way, I have felt that I can learn from you, even although I'm only here periodically, I can learn from you about how to be a better person myself, despite my age. And I admire you for it. And I begin to look to try and develop these in myself, and this is one of the ways that we can learn from each other. It's so easy to be reactive, to complain about what I don't like. But it can feel so much better to look for what I do like. What's better, being reactive or being proactive? A complaint is about being reactive to something we don't like, but to notice the good things in others, we have to be proactive. We have to make it a spiritual practice of looking for them. And we can do this by specifically looking for positive things in other people. Is it even possible, though, really, to become complaint-free? I mean, completely. I don't know. Let me tell you a story. When a minister would travel down a particular small road, he saw a handmade sign. And the hand-lettered sign said, "Honk if you're happy." So one day his young daughter was with him, and they both saw the sign. So she said, "Daddy, are you happy?" And so, toot toot, he honked the horn. And from then on, he noticed that whenever he drove near the sign, he would get a little happier. And he would toot toot his horn. And one day, he decided to visit the house nearest the sign on the highway. And an older man invited him in and told him he was not the first person to come visit. The older man pointed to the next room, and there, in that next room, was a hospital bed with his wife in it. She had ovarian cancer, and she was dying. Not knowing what else to do, her husband had made and posted that sign. And sure enough, every few minutes, they could hear toot toot or ah. And this made the couple smile. They knew that someone was on their way to the beach or vacation, and they were driving along happily. And it made them happy to know that there is happiness in the world, despite whatever horrific stuff you may be going through. In fact, not only is there happiness in the world, the road was streaming with people who are happy. And they knew that despite everything, if they just stopped for a minute, they could feel happiness too. And so can you. And so can you. And so can you. What you focus on, you invite more of. When you talk about negative and unhappy things, you're going to notice them more, and you'll receive more of them. Just like when you get a particular brand of car, all of a sudden that car is everywhere, right? What you focus on, you invite more of. When you focus on positive and happy things, you will tend to notice them more. And whatever you do, if you're around other people, you're actually inviting those around you to do the same thing. When you focus on the positive, you invite other people to do the same. Okay, great, but what about injustice? We already heard that mentioned twice this morning. What about injustice? People who work in social justice a lot have often been prompted to work in a particular field by getting disappointed, by getting angry at a current reality, and then they complain, and by complaining, they talk themselves and those around them into action. So does becoming a complaint-free person mean just, well, okay, we're going to just focus on the positive? That means we're just going to overlook the negative. We're just going to overlook social injustice? No, absolutely not. So how does that work? Well, when we think about the great leaders of this country in the past, maybe in the present, and we think about the great leaders around the world, these were not people who complained a lot, even if they had every right to. Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech 60 years ago this summer. Some of you may remember it. And in that speech, what did he talk about? He could have complained about 2 centuries of slavery and another century of segregation. He would have had every right to do that. He could have spent his whole speech just detailing the lynching, murders, and degradation of his people, our people, but he didn't. And his speech was not called, "I have a complaint." And it was not called, "I have a beef." And it was not called, "Americans are cowards for not talking about white supremacy enough." No, it was not called any of those things. You know what it was called. Every school child knows the name of that speech. The speech was not, "I have a complaint," but, go ahead and say it with me, "I have a dream." Yes. Martin King came up with a vision, a dream. His focus was not on what he did not want to continue to happen. He proclaimed his vision of what America had already promised itself it could be. He brought those words back. He came up with a vision. Someone told me Mother Teresa said she would not go to an anti-war rally. She did not want to dwell on what she did not want to happen. She said she would go to a peace rally. Can you hear the difference? Anti-war rally, we're going to focus on anti-war. Peace rally, let's focus on peace. Which one makes you feel better? Anti-war rally, let's spread peace. Ooh, yeah, that's better. Rosa Parks did not sit in the back of a bus complaining about how she was being treated. And she certainly could have, because she too had a dream. A dream where blacks and whites could sit anywhere they wanted to on a bus, and she began to live out that dream. So yes, we should call out injustice. We are not called to complain about injustice. We are called to work for justice. Okay, so let's recap. Look for the good. Be grateful. Can never go wrong being grateful. Act for justice. Love people, but okay, how am I supposed to actually stop complaining? How? Or at least cut it way down. We have to start with the idea, and I'll just warn you, you're probably not going to like it. We have to start with the idea that most of us, we kind of fool ourselves about how much we complain. Complaining, it turns out, is like bad breath. It's much, much easier to notice in other people than in yourself, which is why you should never, ever turn down the offer of a breath mint, okay? That person might know something that you do not. So here is a 21-day challenge. Like I said, I'm scheduled to be back here in about 30 days. And you can find out exactly how much you complain, and you can find this out by yourself, and no one else needs to know, although it can be more fun doing it with another person. Ha ha! You complain. Oh, I complained about your complaining. Uh-oh. Right, so here's how it works. There's a bracelet. There's a bunch of them up here. And I invite you when the service is all over, before you leave, to come get one for yourself. Don't like grab a handful and say, you need this bracelet, and you need this bracelet, right? You got that? So just 3 rules. 1, when you catch yourself complaining, you move the bracelet to the other wrist, and you start again, and it's day 1. So you didn't complain for 3 days, you just complained, okay, you move it to your other wrist, and now it's day 1 again. You see how this works? So getting to 21 days, it could take a while. So that's rule 1. When you catch yourself complaining, you move it from one wrist to the other. If you don't like purple bracelets, well then get another bracelet, use something. Rule 2, if you hear someone else who is wearing a purple bracelet complain, it's okay to say something, but you have to move your bracelet first because you're complaining about their complaining. Number 3, stay with it. It can take a long time to reach 21 consecutive days. The average is 4 to 8 months. You think you don't complain. Well, we're going to find out, aren't we? Now, not saying complaints out loud 21 days in a row. It can take 4 to 8 months. How long will it take you? Well, I'm scheduled to be back here in a month. Maybe more of you will have just given up. It's too much trouble. Or you will have made the world around you a better place. You will have made the people, the circles of people that you move with, their shoulders are going to relax a little bit. They did something, they screwed up, that you were expecting for something. You have every right to complain, and you don't. Just a little thing like that. The reason to wear a bracelet is to make conscious what can be an unconscious behavior. So now, I did this exercise a number of years ago, and I had school-age children who were not taking the challenge, who were very gleeful to catch Dad complaining. I did this a number of years ago, and I was pretty sure, really on zero evidence, but I had this assumption that I didn't complain much. But I quickly became quite aware of how much I was complaining when I actually had to do this physical action of moving a bracelet from one wrist to the other. And I was doing it a lot more than I thought, and the bracelet worked. I gradually cut down, and I eventually got to 21 days of being complaint-free. Of course, I don't think I complain much now, but putting on this bracelet, starting today, all the way until I see you next month, is going to be a test. Now, I want to give you another little thing, which is when I first did this the first time, I found myself every once in a while very, very quiet. You know that old adage, if you can't say something nice. If you do take this 21-day challenge, and it's a spiritual test, make no mistake about it, you may find yourself quieter than you've ever been before. And that quiet is a blessing in itself. It is. If you take up this challenge as a spiritual practice, you may get a bigger benefit than you realize. Remember that woman in the hospital bed in her home that was by the roadside? She had every right to complain. But what did she do? Her husband put out a sign on the road, a sign to remind them that there is happiness in the world. There is, and it is streaming by you day and night, and you can open yourself up. You can feel that love, that sense of peace that passes all understanding if you just open yourself up to it and breathe. If you take this challenge, you may not become suddenly popular with other people, but you may find, as I did, that you become more popular in a good way to being yourself. And instead of venting about slights or wrongdoings, which you may be perfectly justified to, instead of venting about slights or wrongdoings, you can make yourself more vulnerable. You can ask yourself questions like, why? Rather than just complaining about it, why does that bother me so much? What's the pain underneath that I'm responding to? You can become more vulnerable and more open to change. And before you leave here, you can pick up a purple bracelet and begin your journey toward becoming less reactive, maybe more responsive, more vulnerable, more you. My wish for you to be more willing to look for all that is good, to feel that love that is around you all the time, a love that will not let you go. So let it be, and amen.